Okay, so you're ready to get your next Apple laptop computer and don't quite know where to start. In this video, I'm going to go over the main differences between the 2021 MacBook Air and the latest MacBook Pro to help you make up your mind. There are 3 models to choose from, and then there are multiple configurations within them, which we'll take a look at shortly. There is the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro 13, and MacBook Pro 16-inch display. The MacBook Air is the smallest and lightest of them all, but despite this, it's recently been upgraded to include the Apple M1 chip, which is Apple's new silicon processor that has CPU speeds of up to 3.5 times faster and GPU speeds of up to 5 times faster than previous models. The MacBook Air now includes the 13.3-inch 2560 by 1600 resolution Retina display, which is the same as the display that you get on the MacBook Pro 13. Prior to this updated model, the MacBook Air had been shipping with the outdated low-res display, which pushed many purchasers to the MacBook Pro model just to get the higher resolution. So now that the MacBook Air has the Retina display, it's going to be of greater appeal to a wider audience. In terms of connectivity, you get Wi-Fi 6, which provides up to 1.26 gigabytes per second of throughput, and 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports. There are 2 models to select here, the 8-core CPU and 7-core GPU version, starting at $14.99 AU, or the 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU coming in at around $18.49 Australian. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit, and this performs the bulk of the operations and tasks of the computer. The GPU is the Graphics Processing Unit, and this takes care of visual intensive tasks from video editing, 3D imaging, and visualization. So it kind of goes without saying that anyone using the computer for video production, design, or any intensive task, they're really going to benefit from the second model with the 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU. I know it costs more, but it will be worth it if you're into any kind of multimedia work. If you're just doing word processing, Excel, browsing websites, then you really could go with that entry-level model. Once you select your model, you then need to decide on the spec. They start with the standard of 8 gigabytes of unified RAM memory, 512 gigabytes of SSD storage on the 8 GPU model, or 256 on the base model. Now, my recommendation here is to always go with as much as your budget will allow in both of these areas. From my experience working with video programs such as Final Cut Pro, iMovie, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Illustrator, etc., 8 gigabytes is simply not enough. You'll top out with 1 or 2 programs open, and this will slow down the process of your daily activities and sometimes even lead to system crashes and failures. So if you do like to multitask and get through your work quickly, then I'm going to recommend that you upgrade to 16 gigabytes. Storage is another one that you have to consider carefully, remembering that once you decide, you can't change your mind down the track. The unfortunate thing about Macs is that they're rarely upgradable after the fact, with the exception of the 27-inch iMac and Mac Pro. So always think ahead here and go as high as your budget will allow. Just to give you some context here, a typical YouTube video that I produce here on the channel can take up to 10 to 20 gigabytes of storage if I shoot in 4K. So if I selected the 256 gigabyte option, then I'll be out of space after only 10 projects. At the rate that I produce videos, I'm going to be done in about 2 to 3 months. Then I'll have to start offloading data onto external drives, which introduces a cost in itself, not to mention time and inconvenience factors. If you're buying from a different country, then you need to select the keyboard language, otherwise it defaults to US English. And then the only other 2 options you get are whether you want to add any software. Apart from the latest version of OS X, you will receive GarageBand, which is a great entry-level music app, iMovie for video editing, and all of the business productivity software that you need for general purpose usage, including Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, which are the equivalents to Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. All this is free with any Mac that you buy. If you want access to high-end video editing capabilities, you can opt to add Final Cut Pro to the cart. And then if you're into music production or audio editing, you can add Logic Pro as well. Now, let's take a look at the MacBook Pro 13. This starts with the M1 chip that we saw on the top-end MacBook Air with 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU, offering you 2.8 times faster CPU and 5 times faster graphic speeds. and up to 20 hours of battery life compared to the 18 that we saw in the MacBook Air. So in terms of processing power, it's much the same. However, important to note that the MacBook Pro includes active cooling, which helps sustain performance of the processor during intensive tasks such as rendering, which can result in slightly better performance under intense use with video editors, 3D programs, and even music applications running lots of plugins. The front-facing camera on all of the current MacBooks, be it the Air or the Pro versions, are all limited to 720p, which is a little disappointing in 2021. However, they do have noise reduction, a greater dynamic range, improved white balance, and ML enhanced face detection. In terms of the recording quality, they all include an array of 3 internal microphones designed to improve your audio when streaming and on FaceTime calls. The MacBook Pro also includes the refined scissor mechanism Magic Keyboard that you get on the MacBook Air, but adds the touch bar, which allows you to access shortcuts and features like your favorite emoji, and quicker access to Siri along with Touch ID to unlock your Mac, open password protected documents, and make purchases. Just like the MacBook Air, you get Wi-Fi 6 and 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports. When it comes to the choice within the MacBook Pro range, we start with a 13-inch model, which has the M1 processor version with only 256 gigabytes storage, or the M1 with 512 gigabytes. Even though there has been a lot of hype around the new M1 processor, it doesn't always perform as well as a comparable Intel spec when it comes to certain tasks, and there are still some software titles that haven't been optimized for the M1 processor, so Apple still have 2 i5 options in the lineup for those not quite ready to jump into Apple's new silicon chip technology. From what I've seen of the performance tests, the M1 is anywhere from 25% to 50% faster than the i5, given that all the apps I use are already optimized for the new Silicon M1. So I think for me, that's going to be a much more logical choice. If you want a larger display, the 16-inch model gives you the choice between the 2.6 GHz 6-core processor version with 512 GB storage, or the 2.3 GHz 8-core processor with 1 TB storage. The 2.6 GHz model has an AMD Radeon Pro 5300M graphics card with 4 GB of GDDR6 memory, and the 2.36 GHz 8-core version has the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M with 4 GB of GDDR6 memory, which is the most capable of all of the MacBook Pros in terms of pure processing power and graphics capabilities, making it ideal for video production, 3D visualization, or any graphic intensive tasks such as rendering. Even though there's been a lot of hype about the M1 processor, and it's probably the way to go if you're going for the 13-inch MacBook Pro, at this stage you can't get an M1 processor on the 16-inch model. I don't think the M1 is quite there in terms of its combined performance compared to some of these higher end configurations with the i9 processor and AMD Radeon Pro graphics. So Apple are probably holding off on implementing ARM processors in these models until they're absolutely ready to do so with an updated and improved ARM processor. I have heard quite a few rumors that the MacBook Pro 16 is due for an upgrade soon, and if true, these would likely include a new M2 processor that will be the first of the Apple Silicon chips to really outperform the i7 and i9 processors and graphic combos completely. So hopefully this quick overview of the differences between the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro models has been helpful to you. If you enjoyed the video, hit me up with a like, and if you want to see more from me, consider subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one. Bye for now.